Let's talk Underdog Fantasy. The season is over. The Super Bowl happened a couple weeks ago, but it doesn't mean you can't get in on the action. Underdog Fantasy has the big board still available, pre-NFL rookie draft, and it's a best ball tournament. Really excited to do one today. You can win real prizes, compete against players like myself, Billy, my partner, and maybe Underdog will eventually get to Ireland. Colm can play as well. But we're really excited that Underdog is our sponsor. And if you haven't downloaded the app, make sure you do. Go to Underdog Fantasy or UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code FFF for a 100% match up to $100. So you can get up to $200 in your account for Underdog Fantasy. It's a great place to play best ball or tournaments or pick'ems during the season. And once again, Underdog Fantasy, use promo code FFF for 100% match up to $100.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Fanalists Podcast, powered by Underdog Fantasy and presented by Fantasy Data, home to some of the industry's most accurate rankings.
And welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast, presented by Fantasy Data and powered by Underdog Fantasy. I'm your host for this afternoon, Bradley Stalder, and joining me all the way from Ireland, Colm Kelly of RotoViz and RotoViz, the overtime show, right? So you have the radio show, and I'm really excited that you're able to join us right now because Colm is about 5 hours ahead of us, and finding the right time was a difficult to pin down. But really excited that you're able to join the Fantasy Data stream today. Colm and the RotoViz team, you guys did really well in the FFPC tournament. And I know there was a first place and a second place. Can you talk to us a little bit about your success and your process for the FFPC wins that you most recently had?
Yeah, well, we had a first and a second. Unfortunately, the team I was involved with finished in the second spot. But RotoViz won 2 in the FFPC tournament. So between both teams, I like to say there was $125,000, but our team took home $25,000. It was Conor O'Driscoll, a writer for RotoViz, came first. He had Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow to get him over the edge. We just had the Joe Burrow side of that, but phenomenal run. We got into the final 12 teams. I know there was I think Muzio was in the final 12 teams, and that's what was a fun weekend. And we kind of made a late surge, and we had the Adams and Rodgers stack in that. But that was the week they played the Vikings, and they kind of blew the Vikings out in the first half and sat down for the second half. So it didn't work out, but yeah, super fun end to the season. Second place finish was a team I co-managed with Blair Andrews of RotoViz and Sean Siegel. Was a lot of fun. So we'll be doing a lot more drafting this year, and obviously this is on Underdog today. You mentioned there on the intro, not available here in Ireland yet, so this is officially my first Underdog draft that I've ever done. So I'm looking forward to this, and hopefully they do make their way over here, because I'll be jumping in a lot more if they do.
We'll talk to the right people. Hopefully we can get the wheels greased. How are you doing? It's now after the season. It's pretty cold here in Michigan, but talk to us about what do you do right now during the season? It's the end of February, beginning of March. I know St. Patrick's Day is coming up big. It's big here, but obviously in Ireland, I would assume so. What are some things that you do in preparation for St. Patrick's Day in Ireland?
I would say it's probably more fun to be in the US for St. Patrick's Day. I think there's more of a spectacle around it. obviously since the pandemic started, COVID has had to, or not COVID, St. Patrick's Day took a back seat, and there hasn't really been many things happening. So this year, I think there's obviously a push to try and get back to a little bit of normal. So Dublin over here does have a big parade, which is more like to the scale of, say, like the New York or Boston or Chicago events. But there is a lot of Irish people. Some of my family have traveled over in recent years, like that go to New York specifically for the St. Patrick's Day parades there. So there is a lot of Irish that travel out for the spectacle in the US. For me, I'll hold my hands up. I've never been a big St. Patrick's Day guy. It's always like, because it usually falls midweek, and then it's like, well, I have to go to work tomorrow. And it's like, I can't be drinking beer all day. So yeah, I've usually stayed in and not done a huge amount. But to the fact of the end of the season, it is interesting because we kick this off at 1 p.m. Eastern, and that's usually when we'd be getting right down to the nitty-gritty of our fantasy football week when games are kicking off. So it does feel strange when the weekend's coming up. Where I find it really feels strange is when you get to Thursday and you don't have that overwhelming panic of like, I need to get all these lineups set for my season-long leagues, and get, on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, you need to get those waivers done. I don't miss that when the season is over. But you mentioned about the draft before the show that we did during the week. I drafted on Friday night at 2 a.m. my time with Sean Siegel and Zachary Kruger for an upcoming couple of shows that we're going to have over on RotoViz that'll be out next week. But yeah, 2 a.m. I think I've broken the record for the latest I've ever drafted. But so in the off season, you can kind of do things like that where you can kind of break routine. Your routine kind of goes out the window. Today, I spent the day kind of doing yard work and clearing some trees and things like that. So there is more time for that. And I think my wife and my young daughter are probably more appreciative because when we finish this, then, there is still some evening left. But when the games are on here, they start, as I mentioned, at 6 p.m. my time, and they run till usually 12:30, 1 a.m. in the morning for the first two slates. So if I play DFS most weeks as well as your regular season long and best ball stuff. So you're kind of staying up to that time, and then sometimes, depending on your season-long leagues, you're kind of saying, what do I need to happen on Sunday Night Football, which doesn't end at 4 a.m. And then on a Monday Night Football's at 1:30 a.m. So there's a lot of things like that. But thankfully, we do have Game Pass. And that saved me over recent years, where you can kind of catch that Sunday Night Football game, in the morning without knowing the results. So end season can be quite hectic, but yeah, we're having a good time off season. And the off season sometimes can be busier with, sometimes we'll slow down with podcast content, but we've actually ramped up our stuff over the last couple of weeks. So I think we'll just get busier, and we get that itch then to draft. So I'm glad to be here with you today, Bradley.
Yeah, it's my wife and daughters really appreciate now having their Thursday evenings back with me.
Yeah. It's never just, the game starts at 1 p.m. Eastern or 6 p.m. my time. It's always, I have to check these lineups first thing in the morning. Then you're like, the injury news breaks at, an hour before the actives come out, and you're like, I'm going to have to jump here for, a half an hour to get this set up. So yeah, it can take up quite a bit of your day trying to. And that also probably shows that we have too many leagues that we're in.
Too many leagues. Not a thing. All right. Yeah, it's an exciting time to get into the big board now. I know you guys don't have I know y'all don't have the big board available to you, but I've been drafting like a fiend, and there have been a lot of others who are getting into the best ball streets on Underdog. And your initial reaction, I sent you some of 5 of some of my most recent drafts just so you could get a feel for the ADP. And I'd like to just chat with you about some of the targets that we'd be looking at each of the rounds, and then we'll go into actually drafting it and see, when the rubber meets the road. It's one thing to like theoretically rank or value players. It's another thing in the midst of the draft to say, I need to make an executable decision here, especially based on the build. So looking at round 1, there you have 2 running backs, of course, that you'd want to target in the first 2 rounds: Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey. And those have been the consensus top 2 picks on the for the drafters on Underdog. Although earlier in the best ball streets about a month ago, when this big board tournament came out, it was Derrick Henry actually that was going as the running back 2 off the board behind Jonathan Taylor, but it's since now kind of gone back to Christian McCaffrey and then Cooper Kupp. I'm going to share my screen here so that we can see the ADPs, but do you view Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey in the same tier, or is Jonathan Taylor in a tier by himself?
I have them in the same tier, and the reason for that, and obviously we're dealing here with half-point PPR, but I still think the way that the Panthers are going to use Christian McCaffrey is going to be also more receiving work involved, and that's going to give him chances to rack up. Like, it's half-point PPR, but if you get 8 catches in a game, you're starting off that 4-point mark, and I think they run the offense much more exclusively through him than the Colts do with Jonathan Taylor. Maybe in 2020, they'll open things up and it'll go more to him, but I drafted Jonathan Taylor a lot last year, and there was times where, although the weeks were a lot of fun, there was a lot of games when you're watching them live that were very frustrating because situations where he wasn't on the field, or he didn't get the ball, or they didn't target him on passing downs really pretty much at all. So I think that's where McCaffrey would have the edge there. The downside on McCaffrey is coming off the injury, so obviously there's the concerns with that, but I think if somebody takes McCaffrey over Taylor, that's fair. And I think if somebody takes Taylor over McCaffrey, that's fair. And like you're sending your multiple drafts, as I continue my drafts throughout the offseason, I'm not glued to one of those guys at the 101. I will alternate my shares. I think they're both, for me, consensus 101. And I think they're both in pretty much the exact same value.
Now, those are the only 2 running backs that you mentioned in the first 2 rounds that you would be pretty interested in taking. At wide receiver, though, you have 5. You have Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams. Is that the order in which you draft them as well? And is there a differentiation between like Kupp and Chase versus Jefferson? What would you say are the differentiating factors between those wide receivers you want to target in the first round?
I think that I would draft them in that order. So Kupp, Chase, Jefferson, Hill, and Adams. There's still that uncertainty around Adams as to will he be with the Packers. We were joking before the show that we're both Packers fans, and that would lead to wanting Adams to be in Green Bay. But there is still a chance that Rodgers doesn't come back or is traded, and that would lead to then, even if Adams is back, I don't think he'll be back without Rodgers, but then you could have Adams moving on to somewhere else, or you could have him playing with Jordan Love. So there is that uncertainty, and that's why he would be at the back end of that tier. Hill this year, I'll hold my hands up. I really love young players. I like players that are on the ascension, and that's why then I have Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson ahead of Hill and Adams. Chase is heading into his second year. Second year has been consistent in terms of the year that most players go from like good player to top tier elite talent or superstar in terms of fantasy football. And I think that's where we're looking at Chase. Chase sat out his last year of college, played last year, had all the talk around drops last offseason, had some drops in the NFL during the season. I keep coming back to the kind of, it wasn't even a drop, but it like hit his hands when he was through for like a 60-yard touchdown. Fumbles it kind of up in the air, and it's returned by the opposition. So there is, those concerns, but he's heading in. You have Burrow a year healthier. This team has gone from the first overall pick to the 5th overall pick to the Super Bowl. They're on a rapid ascension. I think that Chase can take that big leap, and I have a huge amount of faith in Justin Jefferson heading into his 3rd year, but I would much rather have a wide receiver tethered to Joe Burrow than Christian Kirk. And then Cooper Kupp, there's no real way to, I can't really argue a point that he shouldn't be going as the wide receiver 1. Like Aaron Rodgers was the MVP. Cooper Kupp probably should have been the NFL's MVP this season. He was just absolutely incredible. So that would be the order I would draft, and that would be the reason that I would draft that way. And I said I like young players. Hands up, I love wide receivers as well.
Yeah, I mean, in an underdog draft like this, where you're drafting 3 wide receivers, and it's a best ball format, you're going to probably draft anywhere from 8 to 10 wide receivers pretty easily in this type of format. The only first round tight end that you're looking at here based on what you sent me, Travis Kelce. He seems to be going at the ADP 15 though. So on average on these underdog drafts, you can get him early second round. I have seen him creep in the first round before. I have seen him fall mid second round, but at ADP 15, he seems to be a pretty big value for you, given that you'd probably want to draft him in the first round.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of tight ends in this, and being 100% transparent, I went with the boards that you had sent over, and I'd seen them in the first a couple of times. So I went with, first round if you wanted to get him. Realistically, in this, unless we have the first or second pick, my preference would be to not take a running back. And then if we don't take a running back, it's very unlikely that all 5 of those wide receivers that I mentioned will be gone. So, it'll be like, if I'm at the 112 and there's 6 gone, if that situation arises, the second round targets that I have in are Diggs, Deebo Samuel, AJ Brown, and DK Metcalf. And, I don't think I would take Metcalf at that point, but I do think that I would be still tempted to take Deebo Samuel or Diggs at that point. So hopefully one of those wide receivers will last to us at whatever spot we're in if we are beyond those first 2 picks. But that would kind of be my reason. And I do think with the value at the position, like I think Travis Kelce's best tight end in the NFL, but I do think that the Andrews, Waller, Kittle kind of trio, I think they prove to have a lot of value. Like, if they're in the third round or the fourth round for an elite tight end at that point, I would be holding off to try and get one of those guys rather than paying a first round draft capital on Kelce.
Yeah, I mean, Kelce he's been the tight end 1 or tight end 2 each of the last 7 years. He wasn't last year, but I even wrote an article how Kelce is a sell, but in my research, a sell in Dynasty. But in my research, like even if you get to age 35 as one of these elite tight ends earlier in their career, they're still a back end tight end 1 later on in their career. Like they don't fall off a cliff like these big body wide receivers do, because they're so trusty. They know their routes, they know their role, and they can handle, all of the assignments that are put in front of them. So, I don't have a lot of Kelce, but I would be,
I would find it hard to get to him based on, I have 7 players out of 12. And, when we're looking at 7 out of 12, yeah. I don't have Eckler, Henry, or Cook in my list. So then you're at 10 out of 12. So I think like realistically, we're getting a wide receiver in the first round if we're not in those first 2 picks.
Yeah. So
well, I'm trying my best anyway.
There are some viewers who are asking when we're going to draft, and we're going to draft probably in about 7 minutes or so. So yeah, cue it up. So probably about 7 minutes, we'll get the draft underway here. Just a couple more players I want to chat with you about before we enter the draft room. The first quarterback off the board for you, I'm going to go all the way to the 4th round. One of the targets there that you mentioned is Lamar Jackson. And we were talking before the pre-show meeting about these running type quarterbacks and the type of value that they bring to a draft like Underdog, where it's half-point PPR, it's 4-point passing touchdowns, and it just seems like the value for running quarterbacks is so high relative to these pocket passers of Stafford and Joe Burrow and the like. So talk to me about your optimism and why Lamar is a target in the 4th round for us.
Yeah, I feel like he would be going much higher if the season didn't finish the way it finished. Obviously, he had his injury. Mark Andrews kind of continued to break out when he wasn't there. So I think there's some thoughts maybe that, and I think very harshly, and I think Lamar Jackson's never got his just credit for what he has been able to do since he came into the league. But I do think that Jackson has been overlooked a little bit this year. I think in terms of the rushing ability, I'd say to Kyler Murray, I don't think there's any quarterback who can run to the effect that he does and as effectively as he does. And I don't think there's a team that sets him up for designed runs in the way that Lamar Jackson does. So, anyone that's playing DFS, Jackson has those monster weeks and you're into the prize money. And I think that he just presents that. Now, he has improved as a passer, but we also did see where we had the kind of growth in the game of Andrews coming forward again after he had a little bit of a down year the year previous. And, you know, we've seen Marquise Brown step up in a number of times. We've seen him drop and have issues a number of times too. That Detroit game, I think, will be etched in my mind forever. I think there was like 3 deep touchdowns he didn't bring in that one, but he had some major catches then after that, you know, before the injury to Lamar Jackson. So I think they're starting to build around him, and then we're going to get J.K. Dobbins, who's also a target in that kind of range for me, going back from injury. And I think, you know, you have an improved backfield. You have Lamar Jackson back 100% healthy. I think this offense could take a big step forward here this season. So I think that Lamar is a value there. The other one that you kind of touched on there was Murray. I think that he is in the same kind of category, having the rushing ability to get into those, you know, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, and then has the offense to try and get those passing touchdowns. I think that he's interesting as well at the quarterback spot.
All right, we'll hit on maybe just a couple more players, and then in about 4 minutes or so, we'll jump into the best ball streets and have some. I know there's a lot of our viewers who are anxious to draft with us. A couple players that I want to get your take on. You know, as a Packers fan, we've seen both Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon almost, you know, they're converging is how I view it. Like, it's Aaron Jones. He's such an explosive player and very involved in the offense, coming off once again a top 12 season fantasy points per game. But AJ Dillon increased from about 40 carries to like 150 carries, and also caught 34 of 37 passes. In the Jordan Love game, he had 4 catches on 4 targets. I think at round 8, you mentioned or you put in the show sheet that AJ Dillon is a target for you. I think he's a target even in round 7 for me. This is a player who's really increasing. So, you know, you and I are both Packers fans, but talk to me about your love for AJ Dillon.
Yeah, and I always try, and one thing I think is very important when you're playing fantasy football, it's important to draft the guys you like, but it's very important also to not like overdraft people based on, you know, home team scenarios and things like that. But I do think that in a situation like this, you mentioned how they're kind of divergent. I do think that the injury to Aaron Jones last season played a bit into the, you know, the overall workload that Dillon got in terms of the extra. He would have got extra work, but not to that extent that he got with the injury to Aaron Jones. So in a situation like this, when we get into backfields, I'm very comfortable taking the cheaper option of the two. I'm hoping that Rodgers is back with the Packers, and if he is, they're going to score points, they're going to get in the red zone, and both of those running backs are going to get touchdowns. But then if you're getting a 3, 4, 5 round discount between one and the other, I'll always go and, well, not always, but I'll be quite happy to take the cheaper guy. So that would be my thoughts on how I'd be separating that backfield. I think that Aaron Jones is a great option as well, but when it does also go down to the half-point PPR, I think that takes a little bit out of him and adds a little bit into targeting AJ Dillon there. One thing I wanted to mention before we get into the draft that I think I don't hear it talked a huge amount about when we're talking about best ball, or we're talking about draft in general, but when you're volume drafting like best ball, and I sent over the rounds to you in terms of, like, you know, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, and which round are we kind of targeting them in. The reason I do that specifically is I like to, and this is something I learned from Sean Siegel, is reverse your draft. So go from round 20 back to round 1, and then be able to say, this is the area where I get my running back 4. This is the area where I get my wide receiver. And you can kind of go with the data. Whereas if you don't set yourself up with some sort of system, or don't look at the ADP and try and reverse engineer it, I find what happens a lot of people is they'll know round 1 through 5 inside out. And then when you get to round 13, you're like, like I've even written on this sheet that I sent to you, I said, let's see how it falls here. 13 isn't a great round. So, you know, there's certain scenarios where I have, like, looking at the sheet I've shared with you, like, I only have down 2 targets in round 14. Like round 14, round 13 is a little bit of a mess, but outside of that, we have plenty of options. But depending how the draft plays, it just gives you options of where to target. But I do think reverse kind of engineering your draft is something that gets overlooked, but I think it can make you very, very comfortable when the draft starts to evolve.
All right. Yeah, I think it's important to enter this with a game plan, and I really like the game plan that you've laid out, a blueprint entering this draft. We'll enter it right now and hit enter. Yep, and we're ready to roll. So we're waiting for 11 people. Yep, and so it looks like we are some of the first in. So if you want to join us, we are in the big board draft. We're waiting for 8 more people. There are a few who are already in the draft, and Wheeler said he wrote an article 4 or 5 years ago, but then for me the comment cut off. So let me see if I can let's see. Yeah, backward mapping your draft, Wheeler. So yeah, I think it's really important to take a look at. You talked about so many people focus on the first 5 rounds, and
people want cheat sheets. People want to know who to pick in round 1, round 2, and a lot of shows, a lot of podcasts will focus on round 1, round 2, round 3. But I find that like the draft is won from round 10 onwards a lot of the time when you look back at the end of the season. So yeah, I think that's very important. I think that's then why people get maybe frustrated that their pick in round 1 didn't work out. Whereas if we look at the whole draft, we can see like, well, your pick in round 7 was Deebo Samuel last year. He was basically a first round pick with how he played, and then it balances out, throughout your drafts. But yeah, I'm excited for this. It should be fun.
Well, let's not tell what those last 5 or 6 round picks are so we don't get sniped. But I do have them up, and we can talk about them perhaps after we draft them.
Yeah. No, and it's always the thing. I tend when we draft, I tend to record them, and then we split them up as a couple of podcasts that usually drop out. And it's always the thing of the live draft is like, at what point, like we get sniped enough without people actually knowing who we're targeting in our drafts. So yeah, it can be tricky. So hopefully we don't get sniped too many times today.
And there's nothing like getting sniped in February.
Yeah.
We're waiting for 5 more people. The ADPs are up on here. The top ADPs, of course, Taylor, McCaffrey, Kupp. Derrick Henry is the 4.7 ADP and the 4th player and the RB3. Jamar Chase, Austin Eckler, Justin Jefferson, Najee Harris, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Dalvin Cook, and Deebo Samuel round out the top 12. Are there any surprises for you that are currently being drafted in the first 12 on average?
No, I might have them in different orders, but I do think that that's all pretty fair there. I probably would still take. Oh, I see Adams has snuck into the background. I'm just looking at the players that I have in there. The wide receivers, the 5 guys are all in there. And then I did mention Deebo Samuel in the second round if it was possible. My dream scenario here would be, maybe pick 11, pick 12, and to get 2 of those wide receivers as we open the draft. But we'll see if plays out. I know some people mightn't agree with this, but when I'm drafting at this point, I'm looking for the monster upside. Derrick Henry at his injury point last year was looking like he was the MVP, but I'm going to continue to say that although he is like a mountain of a human, he is somebody who has got such a workload over the last couple of seasons, and we do tend to see running backs break down. And like, it's going to be I'll be honest, I'll have 0% shares of Derrick Henry, I would imagine, this year. I know some people probably watching are like, well, that's just crazy, but I'm always going to go and get that wide receiver. Same with Harris, Austin Eckler, somebody who I could see getting closer to that Christian McCaffrey range, but then that gets into PPR rather than half point.
Yeah, I mean, there was so I'm in a dynasty. I'm in a bunch of dynasty leagues, but one of the dynasty leagues, a player reached out to me and he's like, hey, are you interested in getting Derrick Henry? And I said, probably not for what you want for him. All right. It looks like we're at the 1-9.
That's good.
We did get the 1-9. So let me actually.
Pretty happy with that.
Yeah. Let me share this screen instead. Let's see. No, not that. Share screen. Chrome tab. Draft starts. Share. All right. So there's the board. We're at 1-9. And so we're going to have a lot of options. I'm pretty excited about the options we'll have there at the 1-9. It's not as late as the 112 as you were fearing, but let me see here.
Fearing or hoping for, I don't know which I would say. I do like the back end of the draft. Historically, the win rates aren't as good, but it does give you a chance to hit on two of those guys. And then I think some of the guys that I'm interested in targeting look to be going kind of towards the back end of some of those rounds. So it's always a little bit easier to, I think, in terms of you don't usually have to reach as much. If you're at the 112, I know it's only 3 spots difference, but sometimes if you get to the 512 and you have somebody who's maybe an early 7th round player, there's players that you feel just a little bit, it's a bit much of a reach. So we'll see how it plays out. Out of interest, those wide receivers that I have there, I'm expecting Kupp, Chase, Jefferson probably all to be gone. So we're probably looking at Hill, Adams, and maybe getting like a Deebo Samuel or a Stephon Diggs on the way back. What's your thoughts on those sort of guys as we
I've been avoiding Deebo Samuel because I don't trust Kyle Shanahan to use him properly. Like he's an oft injured wide receiver being ran between the tackles. I'm just not a fan of that. But Stephon Diggs would be a player that I'm warming up to more. I think I just left a sour taste in my mouth at the end of the season when he wasn't producing. I suspect that there was an injury involved and they just weren't reporting it. But I'd probably take Diggs over Samuel is probably how I'd have it. But I don't have much exposure to Deebo. So I told Colm going into this, either we're going to agree or I'm just going to increase my exposure to players that I don't have much exposure for. So either way, I'm going to be happy.
That's going to be interesting as well. So I was just going to say, we've seen Adams go off the board at the 5th spot, which even for me is probably a little bit earlier, but that, it could end up that we get a little bit wide receiver heavy as we get Jefferson as well. So
yeah.
So how are we feeling here?
Yeah, Tyreek Hill is available, Deebo Samuel, Stephon Diggs. I think based on our conversations, you were mentioning Hill is probably the last of the tier. Najee Harris is still there. Dalvin Cook is still there. Any of those running backs, or I'll just take Tyreek.
Hill.
Yeah, we'll take Tyreek Hill here.
The reason for that is I just think that the wide receiver upside that he'll give you, Harris is in a situation like the running back or the quarterback that comes in may help him, but he was very inefficient last year. And, I don't have huge hopes that he's going to, I don't really feel he's going to be long for the NFL moving forward. I think he'll be around, but as a workhorse superstar fantasy option, I think that might not happen. Deebo Samuel goes at the 112. We'll see how it plays going back. So that there takes, I was going to joke him in to go, that takes the fear out of it for you of having to. The one thing I'll say about Samuel and how he's used, he needs to be used as a receiver more, but used about running between the tackles. I've never seen anybody be able to run to the outside and not get touched on long 20-yard touchdowns as often as Deebo Samuel did this year. So he didn't get hit too many times, but Kelsey goes and we're back on the clock. So our options are to be.
So we've got Devontae Williams, AJ Brown, DeAndre Swift.
I think that Swift is a running back that I would be open to going for, but I do think I would go AJ Brown based on how the next couple of rounds I think are going to play out for us.
Smash AJ Brown. I love it. Yeah. I got the AJ Brown jersey back there. So
the thing with players like AJ Brown, and that is people are going to probably according to ADP, that's kind of a spot to take him. But he had his injuries last year. He's had his injuries the year before. But when he has been healthy, he has been one of the best players in the entire league. So hopefully heading into this year, and look, you don't want players to get injured, but I think they should be trying to add a little bit more passing into their game. But what he can do after the catch, we look at Deebo Samuel and what he did this year. Like AJ Brown can do those things as well. So I think he's in a good spot. So, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, I think that's an exciting start to the draft. The reason for that too is I think that we'll see round 3 coming up here. I think it might be a possible opportunity to go wide receiver or to get a tight end there. But I do think there's some running back options in round 4 and 5 that I might have some interest in. But we were talking about it before, from kind of round 7 onwards. I do like the running backs there, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, there are some exciting options in round 7 for sure. And we're only starting 2. So whereas for wide receiver, we start 3, and oh man, wide receivers hit at a lot, like they hit higher when they hit, but they don't hit as often. And so like hitting on wide receiver, hammering it at the beginning, giving yourself a higher floor and a higher ceiling. I think Tyreek Hill, yeah, he busted sometimes, but so does every other wide receiver. It's the type of ceilings that AJ Brown that we've seen. He had the game against San Francisco, like a 50% target share or something ridiculous. And even with Julio Jones,
those 40-point weeks are not replicated by running backs as often as they're replicated by wide receivers.
Right.
Yeah. So I think, though, what's interesting here is the 2 wide receivers I had aimed for in this round were Waddle and Higgins. They've both gone at the 211 and the 301. That's surprising. Now, obviously, look, people take them with it. Josh Allen, I think, at the 212, although he is going to be quarterback 1. I think that's a little bit early. But again, that's what I was talking about. If you're at the 101 or you're at the 112, you're going to have to sometimes reach on those guys. Like, he's not coming back to him in the 412, so he has to go there, so can make it a little bit tricky. Mark Andrews has gone off the board. Kyle Pitts, we'll see how it plays out, but it feels like we'll see who's available when we get to the clock, but it feels like, I don't know how you feel about it, it feels like this might be a slot to get one of those top tier tight ends. But we'll see how it goes.
Waller or Kittle. I feel like, well, Mahomes is still on the board to stack. That's a possibility. I don't know how you feel about that, but
I think in best ball, and I know I mentioned at the start of the show that we come second in the tournament to a Burrow and Chase stack. I think wide receiver 1 and quarterback stacks are, I think people put a lot more into them. The actual cheaper wide receiver, the cheaper running back stacks, and those often.
So you want to take Waller or Kittle here?
Yeah, and I have no strong preference to either. I think Waller's going to have a safer target share, so I probably would lean Waller, but I'm open to going Kittle if you wanted to.
Yeah, no, I'll go Darren Waller. He was getting 10 targets a game, and the Raiders' offense was humming for part of the season, and they were operating without Henry Ruggs. They'll fill that position.
You think back to last season and the chaos that happened then. You mentioned Ruggs. They also had the situation with John Gruden. Like at the end of the season with the injury to Waller, like Derek Carr was pretty much thrown to nobody.
That's so disrespectful to Zay Jones. Come on.
Well, he did have Hunter Renfrow as well, who was catching everything. But Renfrow really did well down the stretch. But I do think that Waller coming back in there, he becomes basically their wide receiver 1 again, and I think he's going to get a lot of targets when we get into the red zone. So I think I like to try and get one of those top guys and then maybe get a second option later on and try not to have to go overboard at tight end. But yeah, I think that's the way to go. Out of interest, you can call out the wide receivers that are on the clock here as we move back. There's one guy in particular that I'd be interested in. He's still there. I don't.
I see him too. I see him too. I don't.
Is he somebody who is he off interest to you? Does this feel like too early? Does it feel like a good spot for him?
Once we get on the clock, I can confirm that. So we aren't sniped here by Buffalo War Pigs, but
if he does get taken,
so he took Mike Evans, DJ Moore.
Yeah,
DJ Moore.
I'm pretty comfortable taking DJ Moore. He has continued to produce good seasons with terrible quarterback play, so I think that
as our wide receiver 3, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm in there. Had a few other options. We'll see though how it plays out as we move forward. I don't want to give too much away, but I love all the receivers with the name Moore. Any wide receiver that comes into the NFL with the name Moore, I'll go for him.
We'll make sure to hit on Rondell later.
Yeah, and Rondell broke my heart last year. It started so positive with Rondell Moore last year, but yeah, it quickly dissipated. It was disappointing at the end, but that's what happens. Like there's some guys in this and formats this year, like even like a Trey Sermon, was like a 4th or 5th round pick last year at draft time, and did nothing all season long, and now is a lit pick. So there's some of these players who are going to have that bounce back or have that second lease of life, and it didn't work out in year 1. So let's see what happens with some of those.
Yeah, so going off the board here for our audio RSS listeners, just to recap real quickly, Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Cooper Kupp, pretty chalky off the board. And then Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, Derrick Henry, Jefferson, Eckler. We took Hill at the 109. The Najee Harris, Dalvin Cook, and Deebo Samuel rounded out the first round. Second round, Joe Mixon, Stephon Diggs, Travis Kelce at the 2-3. We took A.J. Brown. Then Javonte Williams at the 2-5. That's about where he's been going. Nick Chubb at the 2-6. That's a little early for Chubb based on what I've been seeing. CeeDee Lamb, DK Metcalf, Kamara. I've seen Kamara fall all the way to the 3-7 in some drafts. Someone had Hill, AJ Brown, and Alvin Kamara, and I was kind of jealous because I was like the 3-8, 3-9. So it's like, ooh, keep falling. No, it wouldn't happen. And then DeAndre Swift, Jalen Waddle, Josh Allen made it in the second round. And then T. Higgins, Saquon Barkley, Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, Deontay Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, Antonio Gibson, Keenan Allen. And then we took Waller at the 3-9. There was a little bit of tight end run earlier, but then Mahomes, Cam Akers, Terry McLaurin, Kittle, Ridley, Evans to start the fourth round. We took DJ Moore as our third wide receiver. Then Herbert, Lockett, Montgomery, Aaron Jones in the fourth round, 4-8. J.K. Dobbins, Lamar Jackson, a fourth round target quarterback that went off the board for us. Amari Cooper, Elijah Mitchell, Zeke Elliott, Michael Thomas, Elijah Moore. Oh, and my heart is broken because I also like Elijah Moore. Travis Etienne, Devonta Smith, and now we're at pick 5-6, and we're up in just a couple picks. Are there any surprises for you based on the board we're looking at so far? Any surprises?
No real surprises. There's a couple of guys there that have gone that I was hoping to get. Dobbins, Etienne, Devontae Smith, Elijah Moore have all gone. I have one other name here in the mix, but it feels like a situation we might have to go a tier below. But hit me with some of the names that are available at this current point in terms of the ADP that's down there.
Chris Godwin, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Pittman, Mike Williams, Hollywood Brown, Breece Hall, Hunter Renfrow are players that are available.
I was just about to say I might have been tempted to go Breece Hall, but he's after going off the board. In terms of where we're sitting now, I would probably say that in terms of the options at quarterback, I might go Kyler Murray here. The other player,
I like Murray here.
Yeah, I have one wide receiver you can see in the tier above, but I think maybe he'll come back to us, but maybe he won't.
Well, we'll let the board come to us.
Yeah, we'll stay nice and quiet.
What the Hayden Winks, once again, of Underdog Fantasy, he put out a study or put out a graphic, and it was a beautiful graphic of players drafted at ADP and how those teams did. And he compared to the ADP versus where they were drafted. So teams that were reaching on players, even reaching like 2 or 3 spots for players versus ADP, it was a minus EV play. If you wanted to be plus EV, you had to let the board come to you. So you were guaranteed to lose if you were reaching 5, 6, 7, 10 spots, 12 spots for your guy just because it fit the build. And that's why we should probably not reach on somebody. We're at pick 64. So right here, there are a couple wide receivers once again. And I think we're just going to have to commit to this 0 running back build here, Colm.
I'm very committed. Don't worry. There's no fear.
Oh, we see Gabe Davis go off the board. Let's go. Okay. We've got Renfrow and Mooney. Do you have a preference there? Or is there someone else?
I don't mind Mooney. The other players that I probably would have, and you can tell me based on ADP, would be Brandon Ayuk would probably be my next option at that point. They would be the 2 guys, but I'm happy to go Mooney if you want to go that way. I know.
Yeah, let's go Mooney. Billy would be very proud. He loves.
No, I like Mooney, and I do think that the Bears are going to take a jump forward here with the coaching change. Fields in his second year. Mooney has looked very good early in his career, and I think Allen Robinson's out of town. He becomes the number 1 guy completely at this point. So yeah, I think Mooney's there is a good spot. I see when it gets to picks like, Darnell Mooney versus Hunter Renfrow. I think like Renfrow last year I said already, he had a really strong finish to the season. That feels like his ceiling. Like, whereas if we get a Darnell Mooney, could have some
and Waller was out. You mentioned Ruggs earlier. The coaching changes. There's a lot of ambiguity in how this team is going to be structured. The offense is going to be structured. I mean, Josh McDaniels is the new head coach, and he does like using his slot wide receivers. We can think back to like the Julian Edelmans of the world, but I mean, that could also be the Darren Waller role. And who's going to stop
He
them?
also like to use Rob Gronkowski as well. So,
that's fair. So that is fair.
Just out of interest, looking through the team so far, I do think the team number 4, is a team that I could have easily have drafted at this point. Be interested to know if they're in the chat or listen to the stream, but they did pick up Brandon Ayuk, who I thought could be an interesting pick in that 6th round. So I think I'm pretty happy with how things are playing out for us so far in terms of the structure. We have 4 wide receivers. We can start 4, if I'm correct, with 3 wide receivers and 1 flex. And then we have a tight end. Then we have our quarterback. So we've kind of gone with, I would still call them elite options at the onesie positions and Waller and Murray, but we're going to have to start to pick the pieces together at running back. But feels like round 7 onwards is where I think we'll go there.
We're getting some love from Sammy here. So we're up in about 5 picks. I am pleased with our build as well, especially given the values at running backs later on. I haven't gone a full 0 RB build in quite some time, so this is an exciting moment for me, Colm. Usually I wuss out at about round 6.
Well, this is where you have to sit in now and get comfortable. I know when I was talking earlier about reverse engineering the draft, this is where you have to have that comfortability. There was a player, and I know it's 1 flex spot, but TJ Hawkinson went to the 7-6, I believe it is. I would have been tempted to go Hawkinson. I had him as a 6th round target if we hadn't got Waller. So I think that's a really good pick there from the team in the 6th spot. I do think a tight end too. I know I don't want to offend anyone if they're listening, but Hawkinson versus Dawson Knox. I don't like Dawson Knox went off the board next. I don't think there's any comparison between the upside.
Yeah, Wheeler's not going to be happy. He's in the chat. He's not happy that you're ragging on his.
Maybe he was hoping to get Hawkinson. And he needed to get there is when we start to get beyond. There's a little bit of a drop. That was the target that we had in this round. Devin Singletary. He is going off the board. Maybe that's for me talking bad.
Yeah.
But
so
the other option we do have here, I don't know about reaching, but we could go for our 2nd quarterback and close that loop off and take Jalen Hurts. That's up to you in terms of how the ADP is.
Yeah, either Hurts or AJ Dillon. What do you want? 5 seconds.
Yeah, I'm going to go Hurts. Let's lock up that quarterback done.
We are all set on quarterback. Boom.
I didn't mention it earlier again because of the fear of the kind of snipe, but I do have Lamar and Kyler Murray and Hurts, and that kind of we're not going to take him, but Fields falls into that for me as well, as somebody who can have the passing ability, but also the rushing upside at the quarterback position. So I think we should be in a pretty good spot there at QB. And now we look to move on. James Conner goes off the board. He would have been somebody I would have been interested in. So let's see. We'll see how it plays out. I'm afraid to say too much. And AJ Dillon went off the board. So
shucks, sorry. The Packers garb gave it away that he was.
So what options are you looking to dive into here? I'm pretty open as to which way we go. There is some of the rookie options I think that's going to be available here as well.
Yeah, there's so now that we're on the clock, I'm thinking I like Kenneth Walker here or Drake London.
And how are we looking in terms of ADP for Cortland Sutton or Kadarius Toney?
That's a little bit of a reach.
Okay,
but,
let's go.
Yeah,
I would go London, but I'll go with whichever rookie you want.
All right, we'll go London. All right, I am committed to this 0 RB build here. I also think that Drake London gets the draft capital, and
you'll also get plenty of interaction on Twitter when you post this team because nothing has more hate on it than a 0 RB build, and particularly when it's in half-point PPR. Nothing gets more traction with me on Twitter than draft boards of 0 RB teams. So we'll see how we go. But the other thing I was going to touch on, I mentioned earlier, the kind of reverse engineering the draft. The rookies at this point of the season, pre-NFL draft, pretty much consistently year on year will jump once we know their landing spots.
Yes.
So obviously you're taking risk by drafting them at this point, but Drake London could be.
But is it really much of a risk? Because we Josh Larkey,
really.
Josh Larkey of Player Profiler, he did some research on how to or what the rookie production is, and he's said that rookies on average are extremely undervalued at this point in the draft, and
they potentially become overvalued after the draft.
Yes.
But Bryce Hall went in the 5th round, which maybe is it's probably the right spot in half-point PPR. But like I could see him being an early 4th round pick. Once the draft is done, potentially even jump. Like Najee Harris was going in that kind of range last year before he landed with the Steelers, and then he's like a back end of the 1st round, early 2nd round pick come draft time. So I think drafting the rookies is something that. It also is a lot of fun because you get to root for landing spots and see how things play out over the course of the next couple of weeks. So that draft I mentioned, Wheeler wanted Hawk, so that explains that one. And we also took Hurts on him, so we're really hurting him, I guess, on that.
Sorry, Wheeler. Maybe we're looking at your draft board. Who knows?
Yeah. So, no, I think the draft I mentioned that I did that'll be coming out in RotoViz this next week. We went all in on rookies, both running back position and quarterback position, because those rookie quarterbacks are barely getting drafted. And I think that they're going to be underdrafted all the way through to the NFL season based on, how some of the guys did last year. Like, people, including myself, we drafted Trey Lance. We sat all season and nothing happened. People drafted Trevor Lawrence. You'd have been better if he sat on the bench the whole season.
I had a few builds, 2 QB builds, and it was Trey Lance and some like Jameis Winston. And I took zeros for half of the season. And it's I
think that's what's going to happen. People are going to, some of these quarterbacks have a lot of rushing capabilities, and I think people are going to overlook it. But if they end up starting, come week 1 or come week 3, they're going to be great values of where they're going. How are we looking? I know you don't want to give too much away.
We'll talk about just the players that I'm interested or that exist at ADP. So Kareem Hunt is still there.
We don't want any of these guys. The guys that are named now, we don't
want. So Isaiah Spiller, Tyler Boyd, and Chris Olave and we're up on the board. Tyler Boyd, Chris Olave. Olave is supposed to get 1st round draft capital. So I'm also not opposed to taking him here unless you want to take Freiermuth as our second tight end.
I'm interested in both of those guys, but second tight end might be interesting in terms of how much of a reach are we looking at for Fant or Komet?
We've got 5 seconds, so
you pick. Go.
All right, we'll go Olave and see if there's a tight end that comes back to us.
Yeah, I felt like that would be the best way to go. There is a situation where we are going to have to start drafting running backs at some point. We are 9 rounds through. I feel like I have influenced the situation. But,
well, there is a running back that I am very comfortable taking as our running back 1 coming back around if you would like to go that way.
And I thought you were going to say I'm very comfortable with my running back 1 in the 14th round. We'll be waiting a little bit, but I think we'll start to look there. We'll see when we get on the board. See how
there are two players in mind for me at this pick, and I'll tell you who they are in hopefully 20 seconds.
If they don't go.
Okay, good. Freiermuth or Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, I think I would take a shot here on. No, it's up to you. Don't rush into it. We do have a couple of seconds. I have Freiermuth and Komet very close. We did lose out there on Fant, but I'm happy to go second tight end. The problem is if we don't go Gordon here, there is a limitation on.
I think there's a huge teardrop in So let's go Gordon there.
Yeah, I do think this year, I think people are becoming more familiar with the running back dead zone and not targeting certain running backs in those ranges. Now, there is running backs that have gone there today who maybe wouldn't interest me, but like if I look through the running backs that have been taken, and this is pure bias, like I'm not a Fournette fan. Fournette smashed last year, but like looking through the guys who have been drafted, the likes of Rashad Penny, we have Tony Pollard, Isaiah Spiller, Cardrell Patterson, Ramondre Stevenson, they're all guys that would be 0 RB, preferred options, but they're all pushed well up. Even Devin Singletary, James Conner going in the 7th round, but that what happens as well is when those guys go in those spots, that does give value to other players. But I think Garden played really well last year. I was a big Javonte Williams fan coming out. Still am a massive fan, but Melvin Gordon played really well last year. So I think he could be very interesting this year.
And to get him at the pick 112, I mean, I'm comfortable taking him at pick 100, to be honest. And I've taken him as late as pick 129 in one of the drafts. So I think that's a great value. And for all of the other values that we have, we can start taking a smattering at the running back position later on. But for our RSS listeners, I'll give us an update as well. Starting in the 5th round, Ezekiel Elliott, Michael Thomas, Elijah Moore, Etienne, Devonta Smith, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Jacobs went off the board, Breece Hall at the 5'8". We went Kyler Murray as our first quarterback at the 5'9". Mike Williams, Chris Godwin, who had a late season ACL tear, Joe Burrow, and then Pittman to start the 6th round, Hollywood Brown, Gabe Davis, Darnell Mooney we took. Hunter Renfrow, Brandon Cooks, Dak Prescott, Dallas Goedert at the 6'8". Brandon Ayuk, we were sad that he went off at the 6'9". Michael Carter, Adam Thielen. I love Thielen in the late 6th, early 7th round. Allen Robinson, Treylon Burks, Jerry Jeudy, Robert Woods at the 7'3", Trey Lance, Rogers, Hawkinson, Knox, Singletary. We took our second quarterback, Jalen Hurts, Kadarius Toney at the 7'10", James Conner, Fournette. And then to start the 8th round, A.J. Dillon. Oh, heartbroken that he didn't make it back to us. Garrett Wilson, Rashad Bateman, Drake London, Chase Claypool. We took London there. Claypool, Wilson, Russell Wilson, Damian Harris, Stafford, Rashad Penny, Cortland Sutton, CEH at the 8-11, Juju Smith-Schuster at the 8-12, Kenneth Walker at the 9-1. I liked Kenneth Walker. I'm kind of disappointed he didn't get back to us. But we're going to be up here in a couple picks. And in the meantime, we've got one tight end option. And then I think maybe we hit on some running backs as a possibility here as well. I think we should start looking at running backs. There are a few, Chase Edmonds, Kyron Williams.
Chase Edmonds, I think, is the option. It's up to you. I'm happy to go with Williams as well. I mentioned this earlier, the cheaper option. I know there's free agency and people who get cut and things can move around, but I think Connor was my guy last year, but I think, Edmonds showed a lot of explosiveness, had his injury. So I think that he is somebody there. So now we start to get into a situation where we missed out on a few of our running back targets, guys that we had in that we were hoping to get, but Edmonds was the running back I had circled in for the 11th round. So to get him there is really good. Some of the options that I had put on that list for you, the only one that actually went in the same round as I had on the list was Devin Singletary. So running backs going a little bit earlier than some of the recent drafts that you participated in. But this overall is starting to turn into a very interesting roster. So we have 2 running backs now. Pressure's not as high. For your overall build, how many running backs? You did mention earlier 8 to 10 wide receivers, but what's your feeling on running backs? So we have our 2 quarterbacks. We have sat on tight end after Darren Waller, so we may need to, go and get ourselves a third option after we get our second option. What's your thoughts on how we'll go with the total number of running backs?
It depends on who's here at this point, because there's still a player there that I would like to take. And
I always love when there's a live drop going on. It's like, let's see Who is and then now this is the pick before ours, and it's just going to be.
And Kyron Williams is still there, so I'd like to take Kyron.
Yeah,
he's ADP 128, and we're getting him at 136. So Kyron Williams there, and now I'm feeling better about running back.
Yeah, we have 3 in a row, so we have to hold off now. No more running backs for a while. I've had 3 in a row. That's too many.
And there wasn't a tight end that I really wanted to reach on anyways.
My guys are all going to be later. There is a few there that I like late on, but I do think that we'll probably. How do you feel about 3 tight end build based on how we're set up so far with just one guy, and we're probably it's going to be kind of a stars and scrubs approach to tight end.
I think choosing the right tight ends later is going to be big because, yes, I think that later tight end is going to be what we should go for. There are a lot of wide receivers that I really like in these types of rounds, and so does everyone else. There have been 5 wide receivers go off in this round right after we took Kyron Williams, which makes sense. Because...
I think there was a gap. I think there's a gap from him at running back, though, and I think that makes sense. The other thing I was going to say is getting sniped is probably the worst feeling that you can have in a draft, but picking between 2 players at a spot and the second guy making it back to you at the next pick is one of the most optimum feelings in the draft. So you said Edmonds or Williams, and then you get both of them. It's a perfect scenario.
Oh, it's absolute gold. I'm so happy that that's kind of why I don't mind having like these tight, not exactly at the turns, but like the 9th spot. It makes you feel good after you make a call like that. All right. So picking up where we left off for our audio listeners, we picked up Kenneth Walker in the 9th round. That was in the 9-1. Justin Fields went off at 9-2. Tony Pollard at the 9-3. Christian Kirk, Miles Sanders at the 9-5. He's one of my most rostered and drafted players in the 9th round. I'll take him even in the 8th just to make sure I get him. But I think touchdown regression goes Sanders' way this year. The Dalton Schultz, Kareem Hunt, Isaiah Spiller. We took Olave. Rondell Moore went off the board at the 9-10. Gesicki, Tyler Boyd, Cordero Patterson, Noah Fant, Ramondre Stevenson. We took Melvin Gordon as our first running back. Jacoby Myers in the 10th round. Freiermuth, Jamison Williams, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Ertz, Corey Davis, Deshaun Watson at the 10-11. And Odell Beckham Jr. at the 10-12. All right, we made it halfway through. And I'm just going to scroll up a little bit. Okay. And we are 2 picks away. There's there's a running back, a wide receiver, and a tight end that are on my radar.
This is the round where I've put 13 isn't a great round. So you can have
there are 3 players that I would be willing to take here. So we'll see if 2 or 3 of them show up, and I'll throw their names at you. Oh, the tight end went off. I was thinking Irv Smith, but also Kenneth Gainwell and Devontae Parker. Or we can, I'm not going to say reach because there is a running back that I do like later on, though.
I would probably go Parker out of those. We have stocked up on 3 running backs. I would prefer to get back to the wide receivers.
Okay. Well, we'll smash Devontae Parker as
I do think
7th wide receiver.
Yeah, there is some guys that are going to go. And I know you mentioned people liking wide receivers in this range. I do think in those last couple of rounds, I feel like the options are more so at running
Parker
back.
Gets like a 20% target share anyways. He's an alpha. I know there's a lot of hype about Jalen Waddle, but Devontae Parker was getting a good target share. And if Tua takes a step forward, getting Devontae Parker in the back end of the 13th round. Yeah. So now it looks like some running backs are poised to be drafted here. We've got Kenneth Gainwell, Darrell Henderson, Rashad White, Khalil Herbert, and Chris Carson. Buffalo War Pigs is not going to take all of those. So
unless they find a loophole. But in terms of, you mentioned a lot of guys there, I'd probably be tempted to go with the rookie, based on what we talked about earlier. We don't know the landing spot and how things can play. Chris Carson could still be with Seattle, could be the running back there. But I am.
They went Keyshawn Vaughn.
Yeah, I am concerned about that neck injury. So shout out the names again.
Gainwell, Darrell Henderson, Rashad White, Khalil Herbert, Chris Carson.
Yeah, I think it's Gainwell or White. I'll let you decide.
All right. White, but you want White? All right.
Yeah, I feel you're going to
go White.
I had a feeling you were going to go Gainwell, but my concern, we have Jalen Hurts, and I do think that he is going to cannibalize quite a bit of the running backs' work there. We've seen Miles Sanders, his ADP has dropped a lot. I think it's probably lower than it should be. But yeah, that running back situation last year was a bit of a mess in Philadelphia. So Gainwell as well started the season fantastically well, but like kind of cooled off dramatically and then had a little bit of a run towards the end. But I'm just, I don't think we'll get, well, maybe we will. Maybe something happens to Miles Sanders, but I don't see Gainwell getting to the 11th round, whereas I could see White getting to the 11th round depending on where he goes in the draft.
Well, Wheeler just took my boy Braxton Berrios. So, Wheeler.
It could have been the perfect wide receiver 8, couldn't he?
Oh my gosh, yes. And Cedric Wilson went off the board as well. Those are two of these 14, 15, 16 round wide receivers that I really like getting there.
Out of interest, Berrios, do you think what happened last year is that repeatable? Like, I am all over the Elijah Moore train. I mentioned players with the name Moore, but I think that he is going to be a monster in this season.
I think that Berrios is going to slot into the slot. Elijah Moore played a lot on the outside, which was surprising. And that's why I have a little bit more Braxton Berrios optimism. They were playing him in the slot. Elijah Moore, his body's not built for the outside, in my opinion. He's 5'9". Yeah. But at the same time, he was succeeding on the outside, getting open, running routes. Like, look, he was being successful there, and they're probably not going to move him out. So him playing opposite Corey Davis and Berrios in the slot, they were scheming for Berrios. So I think in the 14th, 15th, 16th round, it's a good deal there. So there we go. We're down to the bottom. We're 2 picks away. We've got some running back interest. Also, Rob Gronkowski.
I think Gronkowski might retire. I think Gronkowski might retire, so I'll pass on him. But
Malik Willis as a third quarterback.
No, I'd pass. I'm going to hold on 2 quarterbacks. Shout me some names.
Brian Robinson, Jerick McKinnon, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, Wan'Dale Robinson.
McKinnon.
All right. There we go.
McKinnon obviously is a pick who may not work out there, but based on how the Chiefs are against the cap, how the offensive line is going to have to be built. I believe they're likely to franchise tag their left tackle. That's going to leave a situation where they don't have a lot of money on the running back position. They are going to go with Edwards-Helaire again, and I think they can get McKinnon back on a veteran minimum. I don't think any other team's going to sign McKinnon, so he's going to end up back there. But I think what he did in those couple of games towards the end of the season, I think shows that I think he could have a value there. I'm all out on Edwards-Helaire all the way out. Never was in, but I'm even farther out. They'll never live down the pass up of Jonathan Taylor with that draft pick. Never going to. The player I would have been interested in when I did say McKinnon, and look, it didn't work out for us. I would have been interested in getting Valdes-Scantling on the way back. He did go in between.
He did. So we've got Malik Willis, Myles Gaskin, Gronk, Mostert, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jameis Winston, Tyler Algier.
Maybe Wan'Dale Robinson. Have you a strong preference? I have no strong preference to those guys.
Nope, not a strong preference. We'll go with Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't have a lot of Robinson, so I'll go with it.
I also we said we don't know where these guys are going to land, and we don't know. All of a sudden this week we have the combine, and some of these guys, the buzz could just push these guys maybe even to positions that they shouldn't be in. But that's always going to happen as we get closer to the draft. So yeah, like that we're getting a couple of rookies mixed in here as well. I think if you're going to draft rookies, I think now is the time to do it moving forward.
So there is a tight end that you have on your list in the 17th round that I am very interested in selecting as well. I hope that he makes it back.
What about there is a tight end in the 16th round as well? And do you prefer the 17th option?
Yeah, I prefer the 17th.
That's okay.
I prefer the 17th, but that's okay. Actually, that player is off the board. No, he's still there. He's still there.
He gets forgotten about all the time, so that's okay.
Yeah. Well, he's forgotten in his offense sometimes too. So
we did, and I do think Willis has gone off the board. Malik Willis, quarterback. I do think that if you hadn't went with the two quarterbacks we had I probably would have went for a third, but I think I would hold off. The draft that we did, we actually went with Hurts and then two rookie quarterbacks. So that's going to be interesting to see. We took on a lot of risk, but we had a lot of success then throughout the rest of the position.
Look, I was looking at like a dozen different mock drafts, and nobody has any freaking clue where these quarterbacks are going to go. And almost none of the mock drafts I looked at were like, yeah, this quarterback's going to go top 10. Almost none of the mock drafts I look at, quarterbacks are going to go top 10. So it's pretty ambiguous. It's going to, like, as you mentioned,
once the buzz starts, once the
the combine happens, like, we'll get a lot more information. We'll get
every year, they're not going to go. They're not. Oh, all of a sudden they're in the top 10.
Because there are teams that are a quarterback away from competing. We think of Washington. We think of the Steelers. The Panthers defense really stepped up last year, and they've got some really interesting offensive pieces. So not to mention if Tampa Bay, drafts a quarterback, I don't know. It wouldn't be like Bruce Arians to start a rookie quarterback, but I would see him more bringing either Ryan Fitzpatrick back or bringing back Jameis Winston or bring back, like, Bruce Arians types are gunslingers. So maybe not Tampa Bay, but all of those teams depends on their thirst, I suppose.
Yeah, there's going to be someone, and there's your guy gone. There's going to be
Brevin Jordan. Oh, I'm a Brevin Jordan truther. Let me tell you. Oh man.
he might be the only pass catcher left in Houston by the time the draft's over.
Nico Collins too, but
they're just gonna trade everybody away. I think it'll be interesting. I think Brandon Cooks is going to move, and I think it's going to be interesting to see where he lands up. But
look, a late round I haven't drafted too much. Rex Burkhead. I mean,
Everett was the second tight end we talked about.
I know, and I'm not willing to go.
What's our options at this point then?
What other tight end options? We got Tunyon, Parham, Jonnu Smith, Troutman, Weidermeyer, Albert O. Are the tight ends.
What's left at running back?
Algier, Hines, Justin Jackson, Sony Michel. I want to take Sony Michel there.
Yeah, Sony Michel.
Yeah. He has like he always gets 200 carries in a season, no matter what.
If LeGarrette Blount was like that for a while, maybe not even the carry, he would get the carries, but 10 touchdowns you can walk on. But that was disappointing. I thought that when we got to that point that one of those two would have got there. I would have liked one of those guys. I have three other names, but we're starting to get into territory where it's getting risky.
We're getting dicey. It's a good thing that we did take Waller earlier, but
that's the 6th running back. Is that correct? Just want to check.
Yes, we're pretty set at running back. I think we're set at quarterback, so we can just hammer wide receiver, tight end the rest of the way.
Yeah. So we have 3 picks left, but we'll see.
I think 3 tight ends are the way we go here.
I think so, but there's probably about 3 tight ends left that are available at this point. But that was Hines was somebody I thought could have been interesting too, but I do like the pick of Michelle. Just out of interest, I don't see him on the board as of yet, and I don't want to jinx myself. The other player I think that's going a little bit overlooked so far is Dante Foreman. I could be wrong, and he could be drafted.
Foreman is still available.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see if he goes, but I have him and Michelle in the same range, and I think like I mentioned earlier, I don't want Henry to get hurt, but running backs typically get hurt when they have a lot of carries, and he's going to have a
5
lot
screws in his foot.
Yeah. So the situation, like, I think he did a very good Derrick Henry impersonation when he was in there last year. So I think that like, when you're getting into 0 RB builds, these are the guys that you're looking to get, guys who are going to get, like, they're going to tide you through in those weeks, but your wide receivers are going to take you all the way, if that makes sense. So,
well, would you rather, we're 1 pick away, would you rather have Dante Foreman or JD McKissick?
I think I would go Foreman. I have McKissick, but I had him a lot.
We're not going to get McKissick on the way back, though, is the deal. And
I think I would still go Foreman. Now,
we've got running backs
you make
available.
The call, but I would make it.
But Brian,
how are we
looking at the wide receiver or tight end?
Yeah,
so Tunyon is there. If you want to go Tunyon, we can go Tunyon. I've got my Tunyon jersey in the back, so I guess we got to go Tunyon now.
Let's go. We have no Packers picks yet, so obviously the knee injury is concerning, but that was kind of, it
was earlier in the season.
It might have been week 8. It was the Cardinals game, I believe. So this is my saying, is it's not a video game. Some of these guys will come back. We know, obviously, with David Bakhtiari, and obviously he's a bigger guy, so might be concerned with the weight adjusting to the knee, but coming back from ACLs, people just think like, oh yeah, they'll be back. It's not like you come back at 100% and it could be slow. But again, I mentioned the situation with the Packers and Rodgers. If Rodgers is back and they get Tunyon back, I think that could be super stuff. Foreman, I believe, is an unrestricted free agent, but that also probably falls into if he wants to go to a team that is likely to make the playoffs last year, was number 1 seed this year. I think they go in. And I think if you can be the backup to somebody like Derrick Henry, there's going to be games where they don't want to just slam Derrick Henry 30 times. I know they're going to do that some weeks, but he could go back there again. Sammy's drafting 2 teams at once.
I mean, Dante Foreman, he was on the Tennessee Titans 2 years ago. Yeah. That's when he got a sprinkling in, coming back from the Achilles injury. And then he came back last year, signed mid-season, along with Adrian Peterson, and he put Adrian Peterson out of a job. Honestly, Peterson did sign with Seattle, but I don't think Peterson's going to play another snap in the NFL. So,
and he probably shouldn't have played a snap this season either, if we're being fair.
Ooh, ouch.
I always think like it's a shame. It is a shame when players who play at that level, like I know, we're saying Rodgers wouldn't retire, but there is something about like if you just stop at the peak. Like Adrian Peterson,
like Tom Brady,
Yeah. Adrian Peterson for 10 years was the best. Nobody could touch him. But then he's hung on, and it like kind of becomes like, like I made a joke about him there, that sort of way. Like, and he'll obviously be a Hall of Famer, but I think like sometimes there is something to stepping away.
Definitely. Well, for our RSS listeners, we'll give another update here. In the 11th round, CJ Uzomah went off the board. Then Cole Kmet did. We liked Cole Kmet, but just wasn't the right timing. Kenny Galladay, DJ Chark, Michael Gallup, William Falk. Can you tell I have 3 kids under 6?
I have 1, but those songs just they do stick. I don't know. I'm sure you've seen Encanto recently. I'm sure those songs get stuck into.
Yes. Encanto. I think we watched it. I take the over on 20 times within the matter of the first week that we got into it on Disney Plus. So yeah, we don't talk about it anymore.
That's actually a good. If anyone's seen the film, that's well done. That's a good transition.
Thanks. William Fuller, not Will Fuller the 5th anymore. William Fuller went off the board at 11-6. Kirk Cousins at 11-7. Derek Carr 11-8. We drafted Edmonds in the 11th round at pick 9. Gus Edwards, Ryan Tannehill, and Hunter Henry round out the back end of the 11th round. And we're on the clock here, 1 pick away. Looking at wide receiver, we've got some options: Antonio Brown, Jalen Guyton, De'Ami Brown. This is where we just pick your players. And, I see Albert O on, do I see Albert O there? Yes. Albert O is there. Blake Jarwin is there. McKissick is not there. Drake is not there.
Albert O is the pick, I think.
I think so too. So let's go.
Bonus points if we can say the
Akwugbanam. There you go.
I like it is like it just comes. Everyone just says Alberto, but yeah, I do try and throw it in from time to time. But the first couple of times I ever tried to pronounce it, like I remember, I went on Google to see the kind of the pronunciation to get it correct. But I think that, like, no offense to somebody I really like, but there is a lot of games where Akwugbanam looks better than Fant. So I think he's in like getting him late there is a good spot. And I think I'm happy with those 3 tight ends that we've put together.
Yes.
The goal is obviously to have the wide receivers in the flex. That leads to you only starting 1 tight end. Out of those 3 guys, you're hoping to start Darren Waller pretty much every week, barring buys. But those other guys will have some spike weeks as well as they go forward. I was just going to ask you, the William Fuller part, I have noticed that on the Underdog board here and on the FFPC board. Is that an official thing?
I haven't heard the reasoning, but I would assume there was a lot that happened last year. So
I don't know what happened. Then his finger was obviously crushed, which was a lot worse than what we had
evidently. We're on the clock here. We can talk more Will Fuller in a second, but Jawan Jennings, Dwayne Eskridge. I've seen Amari Rodgers taken here, Duvernay, James Washington, Emir Smith-Marset.
Maybe Washington. There's not a lot of options there. I'll let you take the preference here if you have a preference.
Yeah, let's take Washington. I don't have too much, but I've seen a lot of players who are much smarter than I am take James Washington as the last pick here, and so I will mimic that. But back to Will Fuller. Yeah, you mentioned his finger was like broken or crushed or something, and then he came back and then left the team again for mental health reasons, I believe, or it was the mental health reasons that he missed the game in the beginning, and then he had the finger injury. I can't remember which to keep straight.
And he also, if you remember back, he was suspended for week 1, I believe it was.
He was suspended at the end of the previous season,
yeah,
and then he needed 1 more game at the beginning, and it was only a 1-year deal. And I think that there were rumors that Deshaun Watson would go to Miami and re-hook up with
just such a messy situation.
Like Miami could have been, like Miami had a lot of things going for it. And then, I don't know, you trade 2 first-round picks for Jalen Waddle. You don't, your owner's making there's some accusation. You fire the coach that, I know they lost 7 straight, but they also won 7 straight. Like, there's something to be said for a coach like Flores. Like, they don't grow on trees as a coach like that. So that was one of the most surprising fires that I would say. And I know that there's been the lawsuit and everything that's followed through with it, but from an NFL perspective, I just don't understand why someone wouldn't want to hire a player's coach like that who has demonstrated success. So, Miami has a lot of questions, and that's why I don't draft a lot of players that are there. Maybe Waddle and maybe to stack with Tua, but there's not a lot of players.
The other thing with them is they like when you look at Miami, like they were a team who was in full rebuild mode, and they then improved and
significantly.
And then they sacked the coach. Like there's I've heard Ben Gretz talk about this year. Like, he was like, they're on the ascent. Like, bad teams stay bad. Like, the Giants stay bad, the Dolphins stay, because they're not given the patience of, like, some things aren't going to work out and it's going to take 2 or 3 years. They're expecting, like, in 2 years, like, to basically do what the Bengals did, go from the 1st overall pick to the 5th overall pick to the Super Bowl. Like, that doesn't happen.
Well, Wheeler, it was great drafting with you, even though you timed out the last couple picks. Come on, Wheeler. And then Sammy is asking, are you guys going to draft again in the near future? The fancy data team, or the Fanalists, Billy and myself, we do drafts like this multiple times a week. And we have guests like Colm on to help think through strategy and give some feedback. And highlight some players. And we're really happy that Colm was able to come on the draft today and make it work for his schedule, not make it a 2 a.m. scheduled draft. So yes, we will be doing regular drafts on Underdog throughout the off season. Once Best Ball Mania gets going after the draft, we're going to be doing even more. So we're really excited to continue our partnership with Underdog. And if you don't have an account or haven't signed up yet, download the app. It's really easy. One of the best mobile experiences you can have. So it's awesome. And if you haven't downloaded it, use the promo code FFF for first time deposits, up to $100. So really excited to do that. We're gonna, you guys are cool. Thanks, Sammy. Appreciate the love. Great draft, guys. Yeah, we're going to actually take a couple moments and we'll look through the draft board and just look through a couple of the teams here. I know that Jason said he is team 4, so we'll look at team 4. We'll also look at Wheeler's team, our team, and then Sammy's team as well real quick. And then we'll thank Colm for taking a little bit of time here. So let me pull up the. Sammy said he's addicted to Underdog as well, and I would say that that's definitely the case for myself. So let's take a look at the draft here. Team 4, Van Falcons. That's Jason Van Buren. He started out Jamar Chase, Alvin Kamara, Kyle Pitts, J.K. Dobbins, Travis Etienne. He took our Ayuk and then stacked him with Trey Lance, Rashad Penny, Christian Kirk, Zach Ertz. I like Christian Kirk there in the 9th round. Did you see recently the photos of Josh Allen and Christian Kirk going on a double date?
No.
Oh yeah. Woo! I'm excited. I'm excited for that to happen.
I was thinking that here.
Yeah, so Christian Kirk, and he also had an awesome prospect profile. So I think that the existence of DeAndre Hopkins had really hindered him. I'm excited for Christian Kirk. I think that's a good pick. Zach Ertz in the 10th round, then DJ Chark, Russell Gage, Marvin Jones, Matt Ryan, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Carson Wentz, Sky Moore, JD McKissick. I was hoping McKissick would come back to us, but it just wasn't going to be. Quez Watkins and Juwan Jennings. All right. So I like some of those picks. I do like Kyle Pitts there at 3-4 as well. I know you haven't had Colm. I looked at your list and I didn't want to give you a hard time, but I am a Kyle Pitts stan, and you not having him on one of your target lists, I was kind of disappointed, but I left it for the end so that we could at least get through this draft.
Yeah, and to be honest, Pitts, I think had I think he had a tremendous rookie season, but based on where people were drafting him last year and the expectation of what he would deliver, I suppose from a fantasy point score, and didn't really get in the end zone. He is in terms of how I have these guys split up, I have him just after Kittle. And, if, for example, we were in a situation where the other guys were gone, I would definitely be taking him. And look, I think there's between Waller, Pitts, and Kittle, there's, those guys can be swapped up a bit, like I was saying at the start with Taylor and McCaffrey. But yeah, like I said, with wide receivers heading into their second year, that's when the big jump tends to happen. I'm expecting Pitts to take a big jump here this year as well. The other one player I would have mentioned there in that team, that's the team I mentioned during the draft that I could have easily seen myself drafting that team. I think obviously the concerns around Kamara, you mentioned how he dropped in some drafts, but if you want to get him, you have to go and get him there. But the Wentz pick, I don't expect Wentz to be with the Colts. And if you go to the point of that draft, we talked about Wallace, the quarterback, the rookie quarterback, and I do think that he went one pick after in round 16. So I might have went there, and I think there would be the upside baked in with the rookie and that one. But again, the rookie mightn't play all season and Wentz mightn't play all season. It might both be the same, but that would be the one thing I would have thought about change. But I think that's a strong roster.
Oh, I love the ETN in the 5th round.
Yeah.
He's one of my most drafted running backs.
Dobbins and ETN were the 2 running backs I was hoping to get in those areas, but yeah, he got them both.
All right, we'll turn to Wheeler here. He went Justin Jefferson, Nick Chubb, Antonio Gibson, Tyler Lockett, Josh Jacobs in the 5th round, Brandon Cooks, Dawson Knox, Russell Wilson, Kareem Hunt, Pat Freiermuth, Kirk Cousins. I like Cousins there in the 11th round to work with Wilson. And then Chenault born Berrios in the 14th round. He knew that I love Berrios. So +1 for Wheeler there, or -1,000. I don't know, whichever. Isaiah McKenzie. He's a free agent. I can't remember if he's restricted or unrestricted, but the word on the street is that he might resign with Buffalo. Justin Ross would be interesting. I hope that Ross goes to Jacksonville and just goes with Trevor Lawrence, his college quarterback. I think that would be a nice pairing.
I just hope that the Jags are better this year than they were last year. That's all I hope. I hope we get some life out of Chenault and we get Lawrence to step forward. We mentioned the Miami situation, Jacksonville. That's a tough scene.
Yeah. So Wheeler did say, and he's pointing out that he did stack Jefferson with Cousins and Lockett with Wilson, and to get those 2 quarterbacks as well, fitting pretty nicely in that stack. I like a lot of those. He went Christian Watson in the 17th round. That's a good pick. Adam Troutman, Zay Jones, Jarrett Patterson to back up Antonio Gibson. So any other picks that stand out to you?
No, I think that was the one I believe that he'd mentioned. Am I correct that he didn't mean to? Was that the one that didn't mean to get the 2nd Washington running back, maybe? Or maybe I'm wrong.
Yes, I think so.
I think overall it's pretty strong. There's that one there. Yeah. So I think overall pretty strong. I think the stacks are interesting. I did mention a little bit earlier, the stacks with the wide receiver 1, sometimes based on the cost, don't always return the win rates that you would expect. So I think sometimes, like Lockett being the 2nd option after DK Metcalf, is a better option based on values than sometimes going. And the good thing here is you are getting Cousins well on in the draft, whereas when some people look at like a Tyreek Hill, and I know you mentioned that Mahomes was there, but you're investing so much in that stack that it's hard to hit those win rates sometimes. But overall, I think that's a good team. Kareem Hunt was somebody who would have interested me when we were in that 9th round range when we took Olave, but he went 2 picks before, so I thought that was a very strong pick. And Fairmouth was somebody we talked about as well.
Yeah, we just kept getting sniped when we wanted to take running backs in that like 8, 9, 10 range. So finally we did go Melvin Gordon there. Let's see here. Okay, so yeah, Wheeler didn't want to handcuff his running back. Sammy said that he doesn't have enough rooks. We'll talk about Sammy's team in just a second, and then we'll round it out. But hopefully Pitts isn't immune to scoring touchdowns like Julio. I talked about that preseason and during the season that Kyle Pitts was in the Julio Jones role. It was a down the field threat, running on the outside, and he wasn't scoring touchdowns. So it's perfect Julio Jones replacement, even though he's technically a tight end. All right, we'll talk about our team here, and then we'll look at Sammy's team, and we'll call it an afternoon. We went Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, which I felt were good picks there. We were excited to take the wide receivers. We kind of had an idea going into this draft, too, that we wanted a 0 RB or anchor or hero RB build, but especially given that we were at the 9th pick, we weren't going to have access to Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey. So getting Tyreek Hill there, we didn't get Eckler or Derrick Henry, but I was out on Henry. I wouldn't have even taken him there if he was at 9. But getting Tyreek Hill and A.J. Brown, happy there. We got Darren Waller at the 3-9, especially given that Kyle Pitts and Mark Andrews went 3-3 and 3-4. I was pleased that we got him there. DJ Moore as our third wide receiver in the 4th round. Oh, like we're not going to have to worry about wide receiver ever, in this draft. So because of this draft, we went Kyler Murray in the 5th round, Darnell Mooney in the 6th round. I'm looking, and part of me likes Brandon Cooks more than Darnell Mooney, but I wonder if we were banking on Cooks coming back to us.
Well,
like that
I think
earlier than Cooks is normally drafted.
Yeah, the player I mentioned at that point was Ayuk, and he obviously had a lower ADP, and I don't know if Cooks had lesser than Ayuk, but I'm pretty happy though to have Mooney there. I think that situation is going to be really good for him in Chicago, and that's hard to say as a Packers fan, but I think he's somebody who's on the ascent, and we've seen him go year 1, year 2, and I think year 3 can be good there. So I think that fits. And the other thing I'll say is when we're looking through these rosters, particularly our roster, I'm going like based on construction always. The construction of like, if you take those 2 guys at the start, you're not taking like the 2 quarterbacks, you're not taking any more quarterbacks. If you take the elite tight end, then we still took 3, but it gives you more flexibility to not push on. So I think that sometimes, again, reverse engineering your draft, you can see where those spots fall. And you mentioned wanting to go kind of a 0 RB build in this one. The first running back we took was in the 10th round, so I think we definitely achieved that. But being comfortable waiting is where people tend to panic, and then the structure goes out the door, because then when you're in those rounds where you want to take those 3 back-to-back running backs, you're into a situation where you're trying to fill those quarterback gaps, and you're, like you mentioned, reaching wide receiver gaps, and that can be very, very tough. So I think we've pulled that off. In terms of the running backs, I don't know how you feel now that we sit in the cold light of day and look at them, but we've Melvin Gordon, Chase Edmonds, Kareem Williams, Rashad White, Jared McKinnon, Sony Michel. I think that's all we've got there, but we, a couple of rookies in there, a couple of players who are, backups that could force themselves into bigger roles. And I think that there's a lot of interesting players there. The key I'll always say with 0 RB builds is when you have a team like this now, people are going to look at that and say, your running backs aren't good enough. But the situation is going to be, we need to start 2 of those. We're never going to start one of those guys in the flex. And it's going to be a situation where if those guys outshine that ADP, then this team is going to have a superstar lineup. So sometimes it can, on draft day, these rosters get ripped apart. I'm looking forward to when you share this on Twitter later to see how the responses come in. But I think we've kind of achieved what we set out to do. And I think it's fun drafting when it's live and you're on the clock, and we're talking through it as 2 different people with 2 different sets kind of rankings and thoughts on it. I think it probably went as smooth as it could have for us today.
Yeah, it's good to draft open-minded to. One of the things that I embraced this year is almost my superpower. So I'm a teacher by trade, and one of our professional developments last year, my principal asked us to bring like an image of like what like our teacher's superpower is. And I brought an oversized tennis ball, like that. I don't know, House MD, if you're familiar with the show. Yeah, but he's got this big tennis ball, and I brought it in, and I was like, I'm like Dr. House, because we spend 80% of the show, 90% of the show, he spends it, and he's wrong. Like, he's doing these tests, and he's always wrong. It's never lupus, right? And and so it's just wrong. Like, that's what I found out this year as well with a lot of the accuracy rankings. But I found out that I was wrong a lot, and so like an openness to realize like, I don't have all the answers, and I'm probably going to like make mistakes along the way. And not like I did this in the wrong way, but I had a wrong take on a player. Like, my view for that player, their range of outcomes is much wider than they're either good or not good. No, like there's the very wide range that this player is, but at the same time, like, what is the likeliness of them hitting this upside? What is the likeliness of them completely busting? And then where is like that middle 60, 68% or so? Where's that median 1 standard deviation going to land? And so I think embracing that, like, my opinion versus someone else's opinion aren't going to be like, I need to be more open-minded to another player who also sees this, like is looking at it, a same fantasy player and their outcomes, a potential range of outcomes, maybe they're not as focused on the negative and instead see the positive, or vice versa. So that's why I really, enjoyed drafting with you today, because, you brought up, like, you asked me to send some of the draft boards that I had done, and your immediate response was, there's no way we're going to agree on the first 4 rounds on any player. And I thought that was awesome, because we're looking at this in different ways and different perspectives. But I still came away from this draft seeing, like, I got some of the players that I still really like. Like, I love Albert Okwuegbunam. I like Devontae Parker in the 13th round. I like Melvin Gordon in the 10th round. Like, those are players that I'm really comfortable with. But also, I don't have a lot of exposure to Wan'Dale Robinson, or Rashad White, or even Darnell Mooney. Usually I get sniped on Darnell Mooney if I wanted him, or I want to wait on Mooney. So
the other thing with somebody like a Mooney, or say like Drake London or Chris Olave or Devontae Parker, like Devontae Parker, I believe might be our wide receiver 7. So what happens then is when you get into that point, you're like, well, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. If it hits, it's massive. And the thing you mentioned, I mentioned structure earlier and having the draft structure. The other part is, rather than being like, I need to get these guys or the rest is terrible, like having those kind of options where players are almost interchangeable. So like we took Darnell Mooney. If we'd have taken Brandon Ayuk or Brandon Cooks, I would have still have been pleased with that pick. So it's a case, like you mentioned, the range of outcomes, like Marquise Brown falls into that. For me, those guys in different drafts, a bit like I said at the start with Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor, like you're going to sprinkle up those exposures and you're going to be right on maybe 2 of those guys hitting, but you might be wrong on 2 of them. But it's like, the thing here is we're trying to get combinations of players who all hit, and you don't need it. Like, if you take 20 round draft and 15 of those guys hit, you're going to probably be advancing here in these tournaments. So it's a case of like getting those combinations together. And that's why I mentioned at the start too, the first 5 rounds, if those first 5 players all hit and the rest of the guys don't, that team's still going to come last. It's still not going to achieve its goal. So I think, but it was a lot of fun talking through the different scenarios, different players today. And I think it was pretty cool. I hope, some people, I don't know if those people listening who maybe are anti-zero running back, but might be interesting if they are, to see if they're still on board with that. But we'll see.
We'll finish out with Buffalo War Pigs and then call it an evening. Najee Harris and Buffalo War Pigs drafted in the 110, Travis Kelce at the 2-3, and then came back around and did stack Patrick Mahomes. Mike Evans, Mike Williams, Gabe Davis. Oh man, Gabe Davis is so early. There was the last guest that I had on that I drafted with, Andrew Erickson. He from Fantasy Pros and formerly PFF. He said, "What's the difference between Gabriel Davis and Cedric Wilson?" Oh, about 100 draft spots. And I thought that was such a fire quote. So not to hate on.
You even cheered when he went today.
I did. I got so excited.
And I like Gabriel Davis, but this draft spot is it is not good.
Oh yeah. So anyway, I'll move on to Gabe Davis. Hey, don't want to give Sammy too hard of a time. He didn't mean to draft him there, I think, is what he mentioned in one of the comments. But he went Kadarius Toney later. I like Kadarius Toney, maybe waited till the 8th round, but I love Rashad Bateman in the 8th round. Rondell Moore at the 9-10, Ramondre Stevenson, Gus Edwards, Josh Palmer, Mecole Hardman, Keyshawn Vaughn. That's a little early for Vaughn, but I think Sammy would acknowledge that earlier. Dan Arnold at the 5-10. We've seen Jacksonville's tight ends be fantasy somewhat relevant before. Sterling Shepard at the 16-3. Terrace Marshall at the 17-10. Jamal Williams 18-3. Davis Mills and Jalen Guyton round out this draft. And, with Mahomes and Davis Mills, a 2 quarterback build, Kelce, Dan Arnold, a 2 tight end build, and then Najee Harris is like the anchor running back. You know, we've talked about the pluses and minuses on this team, I think, already, but is there anything else that sticks out to you?
No, there's a couple of players. There's a couple of players in it that I really do like. We did talk a little bit about Tony. I think Rondell Moore we did touch on can bounce back, and I do like Gabriel Davis. I really do, but I just think that his ADP this year, and that is where his ADP seems to be, is very, very
mid-sixth round. Yeah.
Mike Davis had a good season. The things I would say, I do like taking on risk at positions. So we take Patrick Mahomes early, so we hold off and we try the rookie. Late on. But the problem is then if, your bye week, if the rookie isn't starting, you're taking a 0 that week at the quarterback position. If anything happens to Mahomes, we really hope it doesn't. But if something does, you're only solely relying on the rookie. That fits a little bit like what I talked about with the draft that we did a couple of days ago. But the other part is, it feels right at the time to get that stack. And I could be wrong come the end of the season, but the value that you have to invest. So if you scroll up to the top, to the top of the draft board in terms of taking Patrick Mahomes, the players that would have been available at that spot, I think there would probably be some other players that would have, ended up giving you a better overall build. And then maybe, I know we took Hurts, but, maybe you'd wait and you get Burrow, or you wait and you get Dak Prescott. That's sort of like Dak Prescott, where he's gone there, could have gone in that Gabriel Davis spot, and you could have had maybe Terry McLaurin or Calvin Ridley, where we take Patrick Mahomes. So, I like to look after drafts are over at the 1v1s and 2v2s of what could have been different. And that might be something I would look into. But overall, I think it's another solid team.
Yeah. This was a draft where I don't think there were a ton of mistakes overall. Like looking at the board, I don't think that we were drafting against some noobs. There are 4 shields amongst the drafters. So it was a tough draft room. Not a ton of sniping, but when I feel like some of the tight ends and some of the running backs later on, we were hoping would come to us, just didn't.
They didn't.
Yeah. So I want to thank Colm for staying with us today and doing the draft, and we'll definitely share out the draft board on Twitter, and it's been awesome drafting with you, and we'll have to do this again sometime, because this was a lot of fun from my perspective, and also trying out a build that I'm not as used to, but come on, why is this not working here?
It's always hard when it's live to get the templates and that to fill in. That's it there. It was a lot of fun. I mentioned at the start, Underdog's not in Ireland yet, so this was my first Underdog draft, so I don't have the the ability to do it on my own. So maybe the only way I can do it, Bradley, at the moment is to jump on here with you and do a stream.
Awesome. Well, for those of you, once again, we'll end with the promo. If anyone hasn't downloaded the Underdog app, make sure you do. Go to Underdog Fantasy, download the app, and use the promo code FFF for 100% deposit match up to $100. Colm, it's been great drafting with you. Good luck to everyone else in the best ball streets this offseason, and excited to get some more data at the Combine coming up this week.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot, too. It was a lot of fun having it, and thanks to the guys who tuned in as well. Good to get that interaction.
All right. Have a great one, everyone.